there is a school of thought also that they recoil against real world assets being backed up by digital tokens. And their point is, no, the blockchain, like Bitcoin is amazing. It's, one of the greatest. There's fire and then Bitcoin in their mind in terms of human inventions. And that's what's beautiful. And Bitcoin's not a claim on anything. It is what it is. One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, is the mantra. And then, when I talk to these people about, okay, but, part of what we're doing at Infineo is we're taking life insurance and tokenizing it and putting it on the blockchain. And they think I'm either a con man or an idiot because they say, no, it defeats the point of the blockchain is it's its own thing. It lives in its own dimension. And if once you need like real world assets where there's physical things in the material world that courts have to be involved in, but then you lose the trustlessness. And so it defeats the purpose. So anyway, can you respond to that sort of objection?
Absolutely. I think, first of all of these objections and resistance or pushback is born out of some really bad things that have happened in the name of, blockchain and crypto. And these things make, mega headlines. And we know that people have been hurt, whether it's FTX or Celsius or Voyager or Terra Luna, the list goes on and on and on. Like, it's truly amazing how many rug pulls and how many collapses there have been. And so it is, it's understandable, right, that people just recoil at anything crypto coming close to what has been a traditional financial asset. The bottom line is the underlying technology is what we really should appreciate as the enabler, as the transformational, element in the future of finance. And that's the blockchain. And that's that whole trustless, immutable record that is transparent and that could really bring about cost savings, disintermediation, all kinds of benefits that we could go into. And for the large financial firms, the traditional financial players, without a shadow of a doubt, they are not recoiling. They are very quietly and focused. They have very focused teams looking at how they will use blockchain technology to reduce costs significantly, speed up settlement, disintermediate, and so on and so forth. So one way or the other, blockchain will be transformational. However, there will continue to be this conversation until such a time where it is evidenced that blockchain is now being used across traditional financial verticals, and then it will become ubiquitous. It will just become this thing that sits behind the scenes, and no one will actually talk about that this is all blockchain powered. I think this is just the natural evolution of technological change and how it affects business and people's lives and the global economy.
Yeah, so thank you. So let me come back again just to clarify what the objection is. So everything you said is great, and some of the things you mentioned are relevant here. And here, because again, I know what we're doing makes sense, but it's when some of these people are coming at me from left field, it takes me a minute to think through, wait a minute, what? And so you're right. There's one group of people with the FTX and all that stuff, going back in the day, the Mt. Gox and everything, just think, no, this is crazy. You're playing with fire, this newfangled, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I'm talking about people that they're so into Bitcoin, they think that's the application for blockchain. And so, for example, I think where they're coming from is something like this. And I'm not trying to stump you. It's just, I'm trying to think through this with you because to understand how to answer these people. It's something like, well, if you say I own, these Satoshis and then I transfer it by using my private key and it gets transferred to someone else, to say, well, how do we know? How can we trust that? As well, because the very definition, what we mean by saying you control those Satoshis is the miners all agree it's been added to the chain. That block's been added to the chain, blah, blah, blah. But if I say this digital token is a 1/1000th ownership stake in that piece of real estate in Phoenix, Arizona,
yes,
there it's not as obvious that, the blockchain might say it, but if the local authority, if I go to stay in my apartment and someone can call the cops and the local title says somebody else owns it, I don't care what your computer says. Well, I don't care. So I
get that. I mean, bottom line is this is why you have regulation across various industries, right? Whether it's in healthcare or in financial markets. And when people fall foul of these laws, then potentially there's jail time and there's significant damage. The bottom line is before Bitcoin, before crypto, there were many of these risks existed, right? There were private raises, private offerings, where you would be investing as an early stage investor in a business that might be located halfway across the world. And the bottom line would be that you are doing it pursuant to certain securities laws, whether it's those in the nation that you live in or the jurisdiction where the investment happens. And so if you look on INX and some of the companies that are raising capital today, we're following strict rules, right? They have a prospectus, they have subscription agreements, they have risk disclosures. That we carry out very detailed due diligence on these firms, and then make their offerings available to investors that we are equally vetting and doing KYC on. And we're not just dealing with anonymous wallets here, right? We're dealing with KYC individuals that have linked a digital wallet to their profiles. So you're taking the technology that could be disruptive or transformational, however you want to describe it, but you're layering it on top of existing regulatory frameworks. Mm-hmm. And so some of those arguments are unfounded in that sense.
Okay, great. Yeah, and some of what you said fit right. Like, for example, just the settlement time. I mean, the way it is right now, if I've said this before, I apologize to the INFI listeners. They've heard me use this, but it still blows my mind that if I have I have a business checking account and a personal one. And so if I need to move money, I pay myself from, my boss is a jerk. It's me. If I write a check from my company to pay myself and I move and I go to the ATM and I do a thing and I have to do a paper check because the limits for I got to go and do it because the limits are different. And one time I made the mistake. I wrote the check too big and then it locked it up for 10 business days. Before it would be, you know what I mean? And it was a check from me to, like, in other words, there was like 9 years of history that checks from this writer are good. And yet, just little things like that, or, just a given that, financial stuff's closed during the weekends. Whereas with blockchain, so anyway, just little, at the very least, besides all the other issues you're bringing up in terms of, what's the value add of adding blockchain if it's not purely just living in the digital zeros and ones of like Bitcoin would be?
Absolutely. I mean, I think traditional finance is going to pick and choose which of these technological advancements that they want to apply to their existing models, and they'll do that over time. I mean, I was at a digital assets event back in November in London. It was attended by traditional financial players. So you're talking Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citi, and so on. And in some cases, there wasn't actually a desire for instant settlement with instant finality or with finality of settlement. There was the thinking was we will have the ability to do that, but we can basically add a buffer. And while we're no longer talking T+2, there's still flexibility in how the technology will get used. We have already bridged some of these or solved for some of these problems. So for example, on INX's ATS, when trading on the secondary market, we are actually able to settle fiat and crypto legs of digital legs of a transaction on the weekends, 24/7, 365 days a year, with a banking partner using their technology, API and a ledger system. So it's going to come slowly and gradually, but it's not going to be overnight.
And is the reason for them wanting the buffer is just to help combat fraud, that in case something goes through that shouldn't, they want a chance to catch it?
That could be one reason. Another reason could simply be existing risk controls that potentially they just can't visualize the fact that you could just completely eliminate an entire risk department, right? You know what I mean? Like overnight, we don't need that risk team anymore. We don't need that software anymore. Some of this stuff is just human. You're dealing with a lot of senior guys or girls in these positions who have just done things in a certain way and are also kind of that old school way of working. And so this kind of notion that you could just overnight make these huge transformational steps is just in itself, it's risky, I think, from a human story point of view. And so I think it's just going to be gradual. And you're also going to see, basically, we have this whole generational transfer of wealth that's happening right now with the baby boomers. And that's also translating into the demographics and the age groups of the people who are now making the decisions at the financial companies and so on. And I think we'll see an acceleration, but we're still in those early years where it's natural that there's going to be friction, pushback. And like I said, all of those horrible stories that happen in crypto, haven't helped.
Right.
Hey, everybody, this is Bob Murphy. Thanks for listening to this clip from the InFi podcast. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please consider subscribing and share this video with others. We've got new episodes dropping every Friday with more insightful discussions. Stay tuned.